Well, hello, friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to dig into LaKeisha's mothering journey. LaKeisha's the mother of a 17-year-old on the autism spectrum, and she has learned how to be his mother. LaKeisha didn't receive her diagnosis. Her son was 8 years old. So, those years ahead of that, she just focused on being the mother to the very unique child that she was gifted. Now, LaKeisha's story highlights a very important point. While we have children with diagnosis, at the end of the day, we have children. And our mothering journey consists of learning the child that we've been blessed with, understanding their needs, understanding their wants, and establishing strategies to meet those ends. Now, let's dig into LaKeisha's mothering journey. Hello, LaKeisha. Thank you so much for joining me. I cannot wait to dive into your journey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that there is such a platform to tell these type of stories. I'm excited, Dr. Brown.
Boom, bang, pow, and shebang. So let's get this party started. Can you tell me about your journey as a mother, parenting a child on the autism spectrum? What has been some of the most significant moments or some of the challenges along the way?
I think, starting out as a mother with a preemie, because my son was born at 28 weeks, we were prepped for he's going to be delayed, let him just, feeder and grower is what they called him in the NICU. He didn't have any, significant physical ailments. He just needed to get bigger. He was a 3-pound baby. And we were fortunate in that turned out to be true. We didn't have any surgeries. He came off oxygen really fast. He just needed to get bigger. And so I was always the optimistic mom. Like, yeah, I hear what you're saying. He's not going to be delayed because I'm going to work with him. And so, I started off as most moms do, with a full term baby. I did tummy time and all kinds of things. But because he was a preemie, we were assigned social workers who wanted me to understand he's going to be delayed. And I was like, I don't think they understand me. You just keep giving me a challenge. There's nothing wrong with him. You keep giving me a challenge. I'm going to work really hard. So, that became my thing. I worked really hard to make sure Emmanuel was developmentally ready. And so, all the way up to probably 3 or so, that was my job, my journey as a working mom, just making sure that he grew, and he was being placed in situations or areas where a 2-year-old would go or a 3-year-old would go. Around 2.5, I'll say, we put him in a parochial school, and that's where I started to get, yeah, but he won't take a nap. And I'd
Mm.
be like, okay, he takes a nap at home. And I remember this one time where he was at this particular school and the teacher was becoming angry about it. Like everybody has to take a nap. And I said, well, walk me through it. He won't get on his cot. Nope, he'll get on his cot. I said, okay, but he won't nap. And I said, well, would you like for me to try a weighted blanket? I'm a problem solver. And so I said, I tell you what time is now? She told me what time that was. And I work, but I said, okay, I'm going to take an extended lunch break. I'm going to come down there and I'm going to see what's happening in that. So I get there, the kids are taking their cots out, and my son didn't know I was coming. The kids were laying down, and my son, he looked worried. What I saw was
Mm.
a kid who looked worried. There was some type of anxiety that I'd never seen at home. Like I
Mm.
could not have placed that if I didn't see it myself. So, the teacher knew I was coming. She ushered me in. I came in and I sat down on the floor next to his cot. I didn't hold his hand. I didn't pat him because I didn't want to create something the teachers could not continue.
Right.
And I did nothing but sit there, and my son took a nap. And
Mm.
so that became where they started to say, there's more happening here. And no school wants to pass out diagnoses. And I'll be honest, I was ignorant at that time. Same school, teacher met me at the door at pickup. She had all these dinosaurs in her hand. And she says, "Do you know the name of all of these?" And I said, "No, was that something I was supposed to work on?" She says, "Yeah, but do you know your son does? He knows the name of all of these." Like, she had a bunch of them in her hand, and I thought, "Oh, yay!" And she's like, "Oh, he's 3." And she says, I said, "Well, did something happen?" And she said, "Well, there's one that he likes in particular, and I can't remember which one it was."
Mhm.
She said, "We couldn't find that one." And he had a meltdown because that was the one that he wanted. He knew that one by name, and no other dinosaur would do.
Right.
I share these two stories because it was the beginning of our journey where someone else in a different space was trying to show me, say to me,
Mhm.
"There's more here." And I just didn't understand that. I didn't understand. And I'll say now, I think they were trying to be kind, but I was
Mhm.
supposed to understand that the other 3-year-olds don't know all the dinosaurs and that had to be a fixation. Like, I just didn't understand it. Um, my son was diagnosed late, probably not until like 8 or 9,
Okay.
because there was no verbal delay, even though he was a preemie. He walked, a little bit of walk. He didn't start walking until 14 months, but that was within the window.
Mhm.
So I was surprised, but I kept getting things like that in the educational space where he just wouldn't do or couldn't do what was socially expected.
Right.
And I didn't really have, any frame of reference for that. And so I had to start to seek out help. And the next thing you learn in this, and when you're on this journey, is it takes a while. It
Mhm.
takes a while to get the right person. You got to tell your story. A lot of times I had developed this notebook that was like this thick. And as soon as someone would say, "We're going to do this test," "Oh, wait, we did that one." I flip, 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 flip. Here it is right here. And so the journey started off kind of vague. It's like a canvas that there
Mhm.
was nothing on except I'm the mom. I can't see what's being painted. I don't really understand. But when you look in hindsight, the fixation on the dinosaurs, the not sleeping like everyone else when there was nothing wrong or nothing happening,
Mhm.
not in first grade, not understanding social space, sitting too close
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
kids, and those things started to just kind of play out. And I finally went to my pediatrician. I said, "This people have been telling me this for like I think we're on like year 2 or 3. What's
Mhm.
happening here?" And
Right.
that's when they said, "Let's take a, further look at this." And I remember when they were asking me the questions from the list, and I didn't realize, it was autism. I felt ashamed that I couldn't answer some of the things because they were like, "Did he have any unusual fixations?" And I'm like,
Right.
"I don't think so." And they said, "Nothing, nothing from when?" I said, "Well, oh, he loved sticks." And they said, "Tell us about that." Oh my gosh, he fell asleep with a stick. Sticks were in his pockets. They were in my washing machine. They were everywhere. And they're like, "You didn't think that was strange?" I was like, "Well, don't all boys like sticks?" It was a very um unnerving process. And
Mm.
my son had this thing where if he sat next to you, he would pinch the underneath of your arm. And I thought, he was just near his mom. But again, as I started to, share the journeys, what the journey we were really on started to unfold. So that's the beginning.
Well, I there was resonance in my mind as you were talking because it was taking me down memory lane. And one of the things was with Ricky too, when he was in preschool, my ex-husband and sometimes myself would have to go there and sit with him through nap time
Yeah.
because we just that he wouldn't stay. He would go to his car, but sometimes he would want to get up and get around. They just insisted that they take nap during that time.
Yep. Same.
With that being said, I didn't know what I was looking at either. And he had just gotten his autism diagnosis. So you really, like when you're talking about that blank canvas, you don't know if
Yeah.
one has anything to do with the other.
Not at all.
Now, there is a term for that, and it's a part of the levels of awareness, and it is called the ostrich phase.
Mm.
So the levels of awareness are the ostrich phase, and the next one is special designation, then after that, normalization, and finally self-actualization. So just for the ostrich phase, is you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. That's
You've
how it
not
felt.
boom. If you've not parented a child with disabilities, if you've not been raised near a child with disability or been in a household or a community where you were surrounded by people who knew, you don't know. So to ask you, had you noticed any fixation,
Right.
especially with that being your first child, you're like, okay, that's what boys do, or that's what
Yeah.
my child does. So
Right.
that is so typical. And a lot of parents will, in hindsight, say, I shoulda, I coulda, I woulda. But the fact is, you don't know what you don't know.
Don't know what you don't know. And,
Boom.
when they told me, this is autism, I said, "Oh, but he didn't have he wasn't nonverbal, he talked." And they were like, "Well, some kids, on the autism spectrum are, nonverbal for a while, but not all." And
Boom.
so they said, "But he was showing the signs. He just that was normal for you. That was who he was. And you had no idea." So, that's exactly what happened. And so for me, once he got that diagnosis, it becomes okay. I have this thing, I have this thing in my hand. Okay. And I'm not one of those, I don't want my kid to have a label. It's how do I help him with this? I'm less concerned about the label. Everything we wear
Mhm.
has a label on it. I'm less concerned about that. I want to know, what do I do with this? What
Right.
does he need for this? If you break your foot, they're gonna put a cast on it. So what do we do here? And you know
Right.
what? Even if your bone heals, it may always ache when it rains. It may never be the same. So that's fine. But what do we do here? And so I think I will say the next part of the journey became when I shared the diagnosis with family members. Oh my gosh, that became why did you let him tell you that? Why did you let him say that? It became this other, he doesn't have that. Why are you saying that? Don't believe everything they're telling you. They're just making that up. One of my grandmothers said, them doctors just want money. There's nothing wrong with that boy. I seen him. So it became this tug of war. Right. I want what's best for him. I'm less concerned about the label, but this diagnosis means something. We can't just ignore it. What do we do here? What does he need? And he doesn't understand it. So what therapies do we need? So
Right.
once you come to he's, first grade, the diagnosis, you're sharing it. And I remember his second grade teacher at a private school finally said to me, I am not trained to teach him. She's like,
Right.
I'm not trained. I'm just not. And he had been there all year. And in that time, there was a heavy writing component. Like
Mhm.
she liked these worksheets where the kids would write because she liked
Mhm.
to post them up on the wall. I don't know why that was part of it. And he would never fill them out. He would
Right.
never fill them out. He couldn't finish them. Put him in occupational therapy for his dexterity. Whatever they said he needed, we
Mhm.
did. And then she did a piece March, Aprilish in the school year on
Right.
the War of 1812. Now, I don't know a lot about the War of 1812. Dr. Brown, I don't know what you remember about the War of 1812, but in second grade, my son listened to her talk about the War of 1812, got up, went to the back of the room. There was paper on the shelf that the kids could take, took some paper, stapled it to make a handmade book, and wrote his own book on the War of 1812. And you would have thought that was amazing. They were so angry because they said, we have been trying to get him to write all year. And he refused. He couldn't finish the worksheet. But here he wrote us a book with pictures, just from him listening to her, just from him being interested in what she was
Right.
saying. And maybe she went over the War of 1812 for that week. And then you were supposed to write what you got out of that. I'll never forget that. They brought the book to the parent teacher conference and they showed it to me. And I thought, I'm confused what's happening here. Are we not excited? Because he made his own book out of blank copy paper
Right.
and War of 1812 all over it. And it was 3-4 pages long. It was, second grade handwriting, but everything he remembered from it. And they said, yeah, and he can't continue here. There's a lot more writing in third grade. We don't see him being able to. And that's the first time I felt institutional bias against an African American boy, with autism, with
Right.
the inability to assimilate. And I wish I could say that was the only time, but it's not. But that was the first time in my journey where I realized that the diagnosis was not gonna help. You
Right.
know, and being able to explain the behavior through the diagnoses was supposed to make us understand, "Oh, okay, this child needs this." No, it didn't. And I've had many other times where, um, it you should be able to say, "Okay, we understand, and we'll keep that in mind or will be noted." But my journey is fraught with, I'll call it educational disappointment because I'm very open. I share,
Mhm.
"Hey, here's who he is." I
Mhm.
even started making this flyer that we gave to a teacher every year called All About Emmanuel, and it
Mhm.
talked about, the his diagnoses, but he's good at this and he's good at that.
Mhm.
He's not so good at this. Just so they would have that because I learned that not doing that, not trying to, give his particular space on the spectrum, because it is a spectrum.
Mhm.
You met one person, that you just met one person. Somebody else on the spectrum will be different. So trying to explain that has really been my entire motherhood with him, constantly explaining that and who he is. And
So I have
it's
a
heavy.
question as it relates to education. Now, has Emmanuel always been in private schools?
No, no.
Okay,
We've
what are
tried
the
them both.
differences you've noticed? Is there any difference?
Um, I will say he started off in private school, but that was, pre-K 2, 3. So it's just like a private nursery school. But when he went to public school, pre-K 4, first grade, y- you explain it, but I think that what you face is really, um, those who are really educated in that space.
Mhm.
We use the term learning specialist or
Mhm.
specialist, and these people really don't have a background in special education. And I know
Mm.
when I was in, elementary school, special ed, meant something completely different. But
Mhm.
there's a different viewpoint on it, and there's different backgrounds. But the public school, what I found is they either lack the individuals who really had that background,
Okay.
or there was one individual to many, and it was too big of a case to really be helpful. And now that you're asking me, years later, I saw a lady in a restaurant and I kept staring at her, which is strange for me. And I said, "I'm sorry. I know you." I said, "I'm trying to put my finger on where." I said, "But I can't not say hi to you. You had to have had a positive impact on me somewhere." I said, "And I'm pretty sure it was at a school or something." She said, "Oh, I used to be a teacher." So she's telling me all about it. And she says, "Where do you guys live?" So I'm telling her, we narrow it down to that very first grade elementary school my son was at. My son wasn't, he's just 10 years later. So she, of course, wouldn't recognize him. And she's like, "Oh, I think I remember you." She was fantastic. That's why when I saw her, I was compelled. I couldn't remember her name, couldn't remember what school, but she said, "Oh, but I left teaching like 5 years ago." Like, what they needed me to do in that space was not conducive, not only to the environment or to the students. And I'm like, "Dang, you were the only one who really got it." And I will say that even closer to, now I'm meeting people just like that, who are like, "Yeah, I understand it. I understand differentiation. I can do a lot of things, but the school environment isn't supporting that." And that's a
Mhm.
disappointment on this journey.
So, well, you talked about the educational aspect. I want to go into some of the personal aspects
Sure.
because Emmanuel did receive his diagnosis a little later at 8, 9 years old. Um, with that, you've had a child for 8 years
Mhm.
that you believe to be typically developing.
Mhm.
And then someone tells you, even though you've noticed some things, but they give you this definitive diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. What was your process? How did you feel?
You know, I think I had to realize something, that while I didn't have a diagnosis, I knew that he was Emmanuel and not any other kid. And I didn't say, "Well, there's something different about him." I was parenting him already
Mhm,
based on who he was. I had no
mhm,
name for it. I had no label, and I wasn't even looking. I was like, oh yeah, he just doesn't like. Here's an example. He had a what do you call it? He had to have these special T-shirts that was soft because he had a texture aversion. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't know that was a thing. I just knew that, every time I bought this type of shirt, he couldn't wait to get it off or he'd roll around in it. So I just didn't buy those. I bought the ones that he could stay in. I had been compensating all this time, not knowing what I was compensating for. I was simply mothering him. This is my son. This is what he needs. Oh, you need super soft socks? Mommy gonna get you some super soft socks. Oh, you don't know how to tie your shoe yet? Let me see. Nike just made a shoe that's got a whole bunch of little. I wasn't going to stress him because other people would stress him and they would say he should be able to do that by now. I don't know a 15-year-old that can't tie a shoe. So we'll just get to it. And I just became, and I don't know if I would have been that mother anyway. I think I would, but I just was mothering him the way that he was showing up without a diagnosis, without
Boom.
anybody. I just wanted him to be loved. And it's funny, today I took him to Chipotle and there was a child that was screaming at the top of her lungs. We don't mom shame, but the child was also rolling around on the floor. And so my son stepped forward so he could see it. Now he's 5'9". He's taller than me now, much taller than this picture behind me. And he said, "Mom, I don't remember doing that as a child." And I said, "No, I don't remember an incident like that." And he said, "I don't think you would have allowed it." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "I don't know. You probably would have picked me up and hugged me tight and walked outside." Like that is the type of thing. That's how I mothered him. Like I didn't have meltdowns like that because in the car I was already compensating. Okay, he doesn't like this, he doesn't like that. And I didn't realize that I was doing this. Like I was already in front of said perceived meltdown.
Right.
And as soon as we went out to dinner a lot. I know some parents can't, but I had a plan. As soon as the waiter came over, hey, can I go ahead and get some water and breadsticks? Or if it was a slower restaurant, I had the water and breadsticks in my purse from the car. Here we go. So I did not know that I was already, accommodating a child with with a need. I did not know. It was just my baby, and this is what he needed.
Boom. I love the way you said that because one thing about in research sites is that parents are like practical scientists and interventionists. Parents may not have the words that service providers have to attach to what they're doing, but sometimes you intuitively know
Mhm.
what your baby needs. So even
Yeah,
though you don't know, then you find out later, oh, this is a phenomena, this is a
yeah, no
thing.
idea. I was
You have
definitely
no
that mom that had
idea.
no idea.
I applaud you in that. So, can you give me an example of some of the strategies that you use for your well-being as well as Emmanuel's well-being when you were going through that? I'm getting to know my kid and I'm trying to find my rhythm. What were some of the things you did? You like, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah, I I don't sometimes how we have a strength and we don't even know what our own strengths are.
Mhm.
I think with the end in mind. That makes me a great engineer, that makes me a great executive in my company because I'm listening. I'm not chiming in as much, but I'm taking it in and I'm thinking, okay, we're trying to get here. It's the same way with my son. I would say, okay, where are we going? What does he need? What are we going to do in a year or so? And I would wait and not do those things when they needed me. Like if they're awake, it's dinner time. I'm not trying to do all that then. Then in my quiet space, I'm a reader. I always, even as a single person, I wanted to read at night. Like that is and I love the house quiet. Oh, don't turn the TV on. I need everything quiet. And so that habit gave me the time to either read if that's what I needed to decompress, um, email someone if I needed help, or research something if I needed to. And I would only do that then because in the mom moment, in the mom times, and remember, I still worked, still worked a full time job. I had to teach myself how to be present in those spaces. I also learned that I need a vacation. And I like to vacation with my children. I like to take them with me, my family, because that's when they get the best me. And I need them to see me in every space that I'm in and also the relaxing space. And so as the older they got, I only went to places that were all inclusive because mommy's not in charge of dinner. The restaurants we passed are in charge of dinner. So everybody has a key. All I need to know is that you went, and make sure you have your phone with you because I'm gonna track you. But that's it. And so for me, I started that early, was trying to make sure there was time for me. Did I have moments where I was overwhelmed? Yes. Yes, I did. And I allowed myself time. Oh, ooh, mommy needs a long break. Oh, wait, I'm gonna take the afternoon off before I go pick the kids up. I'm gonna go home. Nobody's home. I'm gonna go home for an hour or 2 hours. And that didn't happen often, but the more we give ourselves space to be who we are and acknowledge what we're having in front of us, the better.
Boom. I love that you said you choose all inclusive because
Okay.
I don't necessarily know if I'm a cruise person. However, after Ricky 2 began to come of age, and so probably like 9 years old, I realized that that was the only vacation that I could take and really get a vacation because we're on a ship. He has a key. He can go in and out the little teen and kids rooms. They had
Oh, yeah.
things for them to do. We would meet up for like dinner and lunch, what have you. But that's the only type of vacation where I actually get to sleep because as an only child,
Mhm.
I am his entertainment whenever we
Absolutely,
travel.
absolutely.
So it is never a vacation for me. I have to come home and I have to rest from the vacation. But if I go to a cruise, I can actually go in the room and sleep while he goes about. So even little things like that, figuring out, hey, in order for this to be a vacation for mom, what type of vacation must we have so my
Right.
children can one see the best of me and two, I can get a reprieve or a respite that I
And we
need.
have to have a respite. We have to recharge. That's the other thing I say to moms. Acknowledge that you need to recharge. I mean, go to Target by yourself and take the long way. You
That
know,
part.
whatever you
Look,
need to do, take the long way.
but
You
don't
know?
be like me. Go to Target with a list. Don't go there on vibes. You'll spend up all your money.
Yeah, well, if you got the list, but take the long way to Target and get a buggy and walk really slow. You know, that's another thing about having a child on the spectrum. Their needs will ebb and flow, but
Mhm.
I think they are still watching you. You are still, the thing that I've learned is, we talked about that blank canvas. We were in the ostrich
Mhm.
phase, but a lot of kids on the spectrum have a blank canvas for situations. Like, they know
Mm.
where they live, they know their parents, but if you put them in a different situation, that they've not seen before and there's no script for it, they're trying to quickly write, fill in some color on the canvas, right? And that's
Mm.
stressful. It taxes their brain, it taxes their emotion. And so I try to, be an example everywhere I can. So at least when something comes up, he can think, I've seen this, or I've seen mom do this, or mom would say this. So I began to be part of the script on the canvas as he writes. I will say, an educator said to me a couple years ago, understanding that my son had autism, said to me, "Oh, but your children are so well behaved." And the first time I thought, "Thank you." The second time I
Mm.
thought, I don't know. But I realized that I had been such an example on what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, how we respond, that my son was mimicking that. And it became who he
Mhm.
was, because mimic is what you do first. And then after that, it becomes a habit. And he had
Mhm.
written the, expectations of behavior on his canvas based on what he saw, based on how he felt. Back to the child we saw today in Chipotle. He's looking at that like that is, no judgment. He wasn't mean. My son's very kind, but he was trying to figure out, like, why didn't I ever do that? And so it was that type of thing. And my response back to the educator was, you know what? I just love my kids physically, emotionally. I hug them, I squeeze them. We talk out emotions immediately. And that's the only reason why I can think that they, behave so well, is because there is an expectation, but it's
Mhm.
wrapped in a lot of, they can feel my warmth. That's all I got on that one.
I appreciate that insight. Now, for further insight, as a mother on this journey, what advice or insight would you offer other mothers who may be facing a similar journey, what do you wish more people understood about parenting a child on the autism spectrum?
The first thing I would say is give yourself grace. If you didn't know, or even if you knew and you couldn't get a provider to act immediately, because there's a lot of different ways it goes, is trust your mom gut, and
Mhm,
then never stop seeking. Though I built a care team around my kids because I can't know everything. And so
mhm,
never stop seeking out a voice or an expert that you trust that can help you when you have these scenarios. So now that my son is 17, he's in high school, we've had quite a bit of high school scenarios, and I can't possibly know them all. But I have people in his care team. He has behavior specialists, we have the therapist. I can text all of them and say, hey, what do I say about this? Or what do I need to worry about that? Build that early, because that also helps you, not have to, say, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? And it also teaches your child to build in people they can trust, and
mhm,
that you trust them too. That's the first thing I would say. Um, and then for those who don't understand, because this is not something that you can understand if you haven't had to, family members or parents or grandparents, either they're going to get it or they're not. But that's only merely interesting. It's only
mhm,
merely interesting whether they get it or not. Don't change the path that you're on that's best for your kid. You can tell them, hey, you can join me or not, but this is where we're going. This is what is best for him. And I had to do that in several situations. Not everybody. And some
mhm,
people aren't going to get it. They're just going to see it at the end when you have someone saying, oh, well, he's behaved so well. Yeah, that took a lot of work. That took a lot
mhm.
of, hugs and talking and therapy sessions, whatever it takes. Just know that you're doing your absolute very best. And there is no manual that I found on, here's what you do. You know how they have, I don't know, Word for Dummies, there's no book. And even if there
Right,
is one, you can't write one for a spectrum. This is a spectrum disorder.
that part.
So it's not going to be, it's not going to be cookie cutter.
We're friends on Facebook, and one of the things I've always appreciated about you is that whenever I tell a story about Ricky too, and in there is something that you want to know more about, you're a question asker. And a lot of people will hard and give nice things, but they don't necessarily pull away from with information.
Uh,
And you are a consistent question asker.
yeah.
That when we understand as parents in this journey that, I am always a student. If
Hmm.
someone is doing something or someone said something, ask. Like,
Yeah.
how'd you do that? Or where'd you get that information from? Or what did you go to next? Or how do you think I should go about doing X, Y, and Z? Because I'm a question asker. So
Hmm.
even though some people look at me as someone to get information from, most of the information that I have, came from a book or someone who I allowed to mentor me in areas that, I wasn't as skilled.
Right. So you're on my care team, just so you know. You're on my care team.
Roommate pal, I absolutely love it. Now, we've talked about you being an advocate for your son and navigating the education system, navigating family. And I know that's a lot. We're managing a lot as mothers of children on the spectrum. If you could go back to your younger self at the beginning of this journey
Mhm.
and whisper something in her ear, what would you tell her?
Oh, wow. I love that. Um, the short answer is you got this, because having a child on the spectrum, your confidence takes a hit several different times. Yeah, I mean, let's just be honest. You think you know something, and then you're like, oh, well, I don't know. Or you think you got an answer to something, and you try something, and then we're, oh, well, being able to rebound well is something that I think has served me well as a parent with a child on the spectrum. So I would simply say to her, "You got this," because I'm very resilient. Like even in my
Mm,
work world, something happened. I was presenting at work, and I could hear everybody fine, and they did not hear. It was all garbled. I had no idea. It was my best work, and somebody had to stop me and say, we did not understand you. And they went to the next person, and we were tight on time. So they were behind the scenes texting me, "Are you back up? Are you back up?" And I went and got a completely different device, got back up in like 3 minutes, delivered my speech, and my peers, all executives, were sending me notes. "You won the resiliency reward, the award today, LaKeisha." And somebody said, "Is that a real thing we can give her? Can we print it out?" Like, I mean, I rebounded so well that they wanted to give me a real award. My point is, I'm like that way, just personally, even with my kids. Like, I did not have a great week last week. I did not give myself grace about a decision we had to make. And today I'm full of grace. Today we are on a new journey. Today my son has a whole new uniform, everything, we're ready to go. And other moms, this is the thing that I think that I don't often realize, is people are watching how you handle the challenges in
Mhm,
life.
mhm.
And will share, that my son is on the autism spectrum, and people are like, "You're doing so great. You're doing so well with them." And they don't understand the journey, but they do see the outcome. So the other thing I would say to her is, keep being that light, because there's somebody who's watching who doesn't have a light, who doesn't have a care team like you built, who isn't going to ask
Mhm,
questions. Just make sure you keep being that. And I'm very authentic. So,
mhm.
those are the things that I would say to her. And she would say, "Got it, got it, got you."
I
She would say
love
that,
you.
"I got
She's like, "Thank you, future LaKeisha, for breaking it down for me."
it." Yep.
I love it. Now, this is a very unique journey.
Mhm.
What is the beauty that you've discovered in this mothering
Oh,
journey?
wow. There's so many. Oh my gosh. There's so many. I think the thing when I think about my son, just him, the way that he sees the world, the way, and he can articulate it very well. Sometimes I have to go, "No, I don't even think I saw it like that." And he can share it, and he sees it, and he has a great heart. And I think to myself, wow, like, we're so busy with our humdrum, what's happening day to day, but these kids can see a lot of the things that we can't see, tangible and intangible, and they can communicate it to those that they trust. And my son's mind is beautiful to me. Like, the way that he sees things, and sometimes I say, we have this term we say at home called big brain. He made it up. Like, if I do something really smart, like, I don't know, something in the kitchen broke and I can put it back together without tape and it's better than the first time, my son will say, "Mom, that was really big brain."
I love it.
It's
Love it.
those type of things that comes out of them, because that's how they see it. We have a
Right.
brain, we're smart, but you were really big on that one. I love those moments. I love those moments when I get to see how he sees things. And it's amazing, because I would not have thought of a big brain. And it's several other things, but it's a beautiful journey if you embrace it. It has its hard moments, but on the other end, I think it's amazing.
You know what? I love how you said it has its hard moments, because one of the things that I've noticed in those moments is those hard moments make the sweet moments even sweeter.
Even sweet.
I celebrate on a completely different level, and
Mhm.
I celebrate everything.
That's right. As you should.
Mhm.
Everything. And, you know, I don't know that I feel like I'm even lucky as a mom, because my mothering is even more noticeable, because here's someone who needs more, and then I get to see it times two, because I'm giving what I think, and then it comes back to me, in doubles. "Mom, that was big brain." Or he swam for a long time. He turned around when he hit the wall looking for me and all the people in there. And I'm right here like this, you know.
Yes, yes. That is my absolute favorite. So my son's a musician. So without fail, at any recital, any band performance, there is going to be a moment where I see him find my face,
That's
and
right.
he's like, "We did it, mom." And
Exactly.
oh,
Yes. And I wouldn't trade that because,
Oh my
some kids,
goodness.
they get out, they're done. I'll see your mom later. My son I just want him to do the same thing for his family when he has a family. Just be their unyielding cheerleader. And so he looks for me. And now he's in crew, which I know nothing about. And I told the coach, hey, I need give me some time to catch up on YouTube. But now he's transitioning and he went right over to the crew coach at this new place, was like, hey, I do crew. And he came home and told me all about it. And I said, oh, wow, did I need to do something? Mom, you don't need to do anything. I spoke to him and he's naming out all the things that he did. And I thought, oh, and
Yes,
he,
advocate for
I was
self.
like,
I
oh,
love
and so that is amazing. Like just watching him, you know, think about what he needs to do and go and do it. Um, you just there's no better feeling than that. So I feel like that we're rewarded along the way all the time.
I love it. Well, I feel like I know your story a little better now. Are there any closing thoughts or something that you would like to share that we've not yet touched on?
Um, the only thing that I think I would share, I think there's a lady that does Brown on the spectrum. I don't know her personally,
Mhm,
but there is a difference with our kids when you are African
mhm.
American and you have a son that's on the spectrum. And I'd be remiss if I said that I didn't notice that.
Right.
And that is the only thing I just want to mention it because if there's another mom of another, son, that's brown, on the spectrum, those little nuances, those little, gut tweaks where you're like, am I imagining this?
Mhm.
Own that. Own that. You don't not everything requires an action, but use that to, make sure you're fully aware of, where you're feeling that and where you might have to double back and make some tweaks. And I think if I would go back, I think those are the areas where I missed it, in the beginning where, like I said, we had this social worker and they didn't want me to do anything. He's delayed. You just have to accept that.
Mhm, mhm.
That's not what we're gonna do. And
Right.
so, there are all kinds of biases, even in the medical and special education
Mm,
community. And do not allow that to change your strategy for your
right.
child. And it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. But when they see that and you are not deterred, another victory is coming.
See, and I want to add something to that point because you touched on something about just the nuances in cross-cultural relationships. One of the reasons why I decided to go back for a PhD is because I needed to learn how to logically present information
Mhm.
because my alter ego is Mama Bear. So
Mhm.
when you get my baby wrong, I can quickly come out the pocket. It's like
Get you
L
right.
Brown goes and L Tanya comes in, the hair on
Yep.
the back of my neck standing up,
Yes.
and I started to get very emotional. And
Uh-huh.
I realized in second grade that that was not going to work because I happened to have someone who was kind enough in that IEP meeting to pause the meeting and say, Miss Brown, can you tell us about Ricky Two, the person? But had she not done that, I was at the point where I was about to go off.
Mm.
And it was one of those things like, the color purple where Suge grabs Sue like, Miss Seeley?
Yeah, yeah.
It was one of
It's
those
okay.
moments. And the principal designee, she essentially grabbed my arm like, Miss Brown,
Mhm.
why don't we pause this meeting and you tell us a little something about Ricky too, and then we table it and we come back. To this day, she's one of my favorite people, Miss
Mhm.
Burnett. But she gave me a moment to breathe. And she also happened to be a mother bear because her own child has disabilities as well. So she
Mhm.
was able to feel what I was feeling as these people were talking about my son as if he were a number.
Uh-huh. Yep.
So I was like, okay, that can't happen again. So when I went into the PhD program, it was for early childhood education, early childhood special education, because I was like, you know what? I'm in Fairfax County. I'm around people who don't look like me. And what I didn't want to be is a stereotypical evidence of what some people may
Uh-huh.
see as true.
Right.
And I was like, I got a whole lot of time that I'm going to be advocating for him. So when I went back into school, the biggest blessing it gave me was how to present my case logically and void of emotion. So now I'm able to go into those spaces
Mhm.
and I'm able to advocate for my son effectively because there, if I were in a different school system and maybe with people whose lived experiences were more similar to mine, they would understand certain nuances in my language. They would be able to tell some tales in my behavior, and they're like, "Oh, I got it. I feel I'm smelling what you're cooking."
Mhm.
Whereas I was in rooms where people did not
Yeah.
understand me at that level, so I had to present my information to them in a manner that gave as few barriers to understanding as possible. I've since mastered that, but when he was a little guy, I was like, "Look, I'm about to take these earrings off over here."
So
I'm
let me say, I like that. Listen, I know you're interviewing me, but I gotta turn this around for a minute.
okay.
So let me say that that was an important recognition because those barriers are also barriers to help and support for our children.
Mhm.
And they get bigger and bigger when people can't understand the data you're presenting. And I'm going to admit openly right here on this podcast, I have not mastered that. However,
Mhm.
I think it's so important that I think you need a podcast all by yourself on that because it's those barriers that becomes barriers to support for the children who need it, and especially our
Exactly.
kids on the spectrum. And the way I have not mastered it, but tried to hold it in is usually with silence, but it does not work. And
Mhm.
so I like that you brought that up. I like that you had that foresight. Because what I really want to pull at is that this is also such an emotional journey, especially when you are advocating for your child in the
Mhm.
absence of said child with people who just have data on them. They
Just
just have
data.
data, or I heard, or I said, or here's a test he failed, however you want to look at it. It's just data and not the person. And so
Mhm.
that's important to share with other moms that it's going to be an emotional journey and you're going to have moments where you feel like they're just talking about a number and you're like, no, I want to talk about my child. So I want to say I applaud you for that. And you need a whole podcast by yourself on that
Well, I'll
because
drop a little wisdom right now on that since you went there.
okay.
It really is about speaking from a place of logic. And that is the key because when you talk from an emotional place, the only people who can understand your emotions are people who share your value system or
Okay.
have a particular interest in you. So I could talk about all the emotional parts of Ricky too and my journey. And perhaps like Miss Barnett, she understood because she walked a similar journey. The
Hmm.
other people in the room did not understand that. However, logic belongs to all reasonable people.
Okay.
So if I'm able to logically, like you're an engineer and you're like this, then this, then this. If I'm able to present information logically, then I can put logic on the table. Logic
Okay.
becomes a third party. Logic is objective. And
Okay.
everyone can then take that logic and pull from that logic what they need. And
Okay.
so then from there, we then seek to establish a plan to get him to that logical next step.
Okay.
And while it may seem really simple, like lead with logic, it has allowed me to build bridges because what it does when you put it in logic, one, it takes any accusations out. Because oftentimes when we're explaining things that aren't going the way we feel they should, people will see that as an attack on their job.
Absolutely.
Like you are essentially, if it's not going well, and I'm the service provider,
You're saying
one
it's
could
my
deduce
fault.
that you're saying that I'm not doing my job
You're
well.
welcome to my world. I'm good because I'm logical. I'm a data gatherer, but I don't present it with just logic. I'll be like, well, last week it was this, and then today is this. So I'm not sure what we're saying today. That's how and so
Mhm.
that's not just logic. I think I'm undercover smartass too. So I think sometimes I
See,
lace that in there. And so,
we're gonna work on that.
so I think that's part of it too. But I digress.
But when you're operating in that logic, what you will do, you will essentially bring a logical problem for you all to collectively solve.
So
Make sense?
it makes
So
more
even if I think I have the best answer, I also recognize that I'm a subject matter expert on Ricky too. And
Mhm.
then I have somebody who's a subject matter expert on occupational therapy, somebody who's a subject matter expert on general education, someone's a subject matter expert on special education. So if I bring it to the table and I recognize that, in true partnership, I come with all the information about the child
Mhm.
and they come with all the content information. Then when we put it together, we can do a plan forward. And one thing about plans, people tend to work at them more readily when everyone has buy-in. So
Okay.
by doing that, it then becomes a collaboration. So when my baby wins, guess what? Everybody
Everybody
wins.
wins. I like
And
that.
and
Look,
that's what we're in here. We're
I
we're
talk
a
my
team
mind. 'Cause
here to make sure that we have a winning story and everyone here is
I
a
like
part of Ricky Two's success story.
I like that.
And that has worked famously for me. But I understand wanting to
Mhm.
take my earrings off and put a little Vaseline on my face.
Yes,
I
look,
I totally get that. Because that's my baby you're talking about.
of course.
Well, LaKeisha, I have thoroughly enjoyed our time together, and I know that this is going to bless so many families and some
I really
service
hope so.
providers.
Yeah, I really hope so. I'm looking at the under here. It says you are not alone. I really like, that reminder. It's a lonely. I will close with saying it's a lonely journey, but it doesn't have to be. Give yourself grace. Be ready to celebrate the wins. Have a good care team and lead with logic. That's what I would say.
Ooh, yes, yes, yes. You just said a whole word. With that, we are going to end our time together. Friends, we really hope you remember that you are not
Alone.
alone. We are all in this together.
Absolutely.
Bye.